Hello and welcome to part 6 of our video series on building a Node, Express and Postgres based API. Today we're going to be having a look at adding logging to our application, and we're going to make use of a fairly common library within JavaScript called Winston, which provides us a really nice set of tools for being able to create loggers that extend the functionality of just doing things like console.log or console.error. If you want to follow along with what I'm doing, there's a link in the video description to the GitHub repo that we've got here. We're going to be starting work from the part 6 start branch, so you can check that one out and you can work along with us here, and it'll have all the code that we've written so far. So the reason for wanting a custom logging solution is to give us a lot more kind of flexibility on how the logs are presented, as well as provide us with some really nice functionality around like adding colors to our logs, and also dealing with all the things like how we format objects and things like that. So it's just going to cover kind of a lot of stuff so that we don't have to deal with it ourselves. So what we're going to do first of all is we're going to add in a new package, which is going to be Winston. And what we're going to do is we're going to npm install Winston at 3.3.3, and that's the package that I've tested out, that just to make sure it's fully working with everything that we're going to be building here as well. So just going to add that npm install Winston at 3.3.3. There we go, and now that's installed okay. Once that's installed, what we're going to do is we're going to add a new folder to our domain here, which is going to contain our logger. Let's have a look. Yeah, just going to call that one logger, and then we'll just add an index.js file. And what this is going to do is it's going to contain all the information or all the code that's going to start up our logger, allow it to take over when we first get started, so that it can kind of do all of its magic, essentially. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're just going to require Winston. So const Winston equals require Winston. And now Winston takes a couple of things. It will take a log formatter, which will write just a simple kind of log formatter for how we want it to actually present logs in the console for us, and then we'll actually run through a process of creating a logger that we can then export for parts of our application to import and use. So what we'll do is we'll just create a new function called log formatter. And what this will do is it will take a set of parameters, and then it will be responsible for returning a string representation of those the parameters that we've got available. So for the format that we want to add here, we're going to be making use of three separate things. The first one that we're going to be making use of is params.timestamp. The second one that we're going to be making use of, and we'll just wrap this in square braces, we're going to be making use of the params.level. And now the level will determine the severity of the log, and it can come in a multitude of different levels from errors, warning, info, and then debug levels are going to be the ones that we make use of. And obviously you can then determine how important that log is based on the level for when you come to inspect it a little bit later. And then what final parameter that we'll make use of is the params.message. Now, so what that's going to do is it's going to say every time a log is output, we want it to have a timestamp so that we can see what time that log was output, the level that it was logged at, and then the actual message for that particular log. What we're also going to do now is just have a function that's going to we're just going to call it create logger, and it's going to be responsible for creating the logger that we then export at the end. So what we'll do while we're here is we'll just do a module.exports, and we'll have log formatter. And the reason we export that one is we know that we're going to be writing some unit tests for it at some point in the future, so we'll just make sure that we export that, and then we'll export the logger, which will be whatever is returned from this create logger function here. So first thing that we're going to do is something that I quite like as a feature from Winston is we can actually add colors to our logging. And this will be really useful for when you're running tests locally, or you're just inspecting what's going on within your application. It'll give things a little bit of just a visual improvement over just standard logging. So what you do here is we can pass in the different error levels that we're going to be working with, and we can assign them different colors, so that when they appear in the logs, they'll appear with these particular colors associated with them. So we've got red, dark red, and then for info we'll have cyan. And then lastly, we'll have debug logs, which will just come out as grey. So that'll be really easy when you're looking through your logs then, just to see anything that's like a bright red, you know that's a really bad thing that's happened. Warning, there's going to be a darker red. Then any info logs just on what's going on within your application will just come out as a cyan colour. So it's easy to differentiate just with just looking through them. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create a logger here, and Winston comes with a create logger function which you can invoke, and what that's expecting is a minimum level for what logs we should be outputting by default. So for these we're just going to put info level logs, because if you're working with any third-party libraries, they can sometimes send out a whole bunch of debug logging, and in some cases it can contain sensitive information that you wouldn't necessarily want printing out into your console. So we'll just leave it at the info level to begin with. We'll give it a format which will be winston.format.json. So it'll handle all of the JSON formatting for us. Default, what we'll do is we'll just add some default metadata here, and this will just be metadata that's associated with our logs that come out, and we'll call this HTTP API. Just give it a service piece of metadata, and then the final piece, which is essentially what kind of brings it all together, is Winston uses what are known as transports, which determine where these logging rules and things like that are applied to. And the one that we're going to be making use of today is just the console transport, which is going to determine how things end up getting logged out into our console. So all this takes is an array of different transports that you want to work with. So we're just going to work with new winston.transports.console, and from within here we can then pass it the different rules that or the different formats that we want it to adhere to. So we're going to actually have quite a few different formatting rules that we're going to work with. So what we'll do, Winston provides you with a way of combining a bunch of rules together. So we're just going to do winston.format.combine, and then within here we can just pass in any different any number of formats that we want it to adhere to. So what we'll do is we'll just put in 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're going to have winston.format.colorize, which is going to handle all of the color coding for our messages. Timestamp, which is what's going to format all the timestamps for us. One that's called splat. And now what splat does is it allows you to pass in logs as arguments, or messages as arguments, and it'll convert them and do and format them really nicely for you. And then finally, what we'll do is we'll add a printf, which is basically how it's going to log out these particular messages for the console. And for these, we're actually going to make use of our log formatter. So we're just going to pass it in the log formatter. It's going to say take everything that comes up through here and then pipe it into the log formatter, and the log formatter will make sure that it gets printed out like it needs to there. So we're going to add that in and save that for the moment. And what we'll do just to test all of this out is we'll actually just head over to our startup here. Because what we're going to want to do is we're eventually going to want to replace all of these console logs with this new logging solution. So what we're going to do is logger equals require logger, and then what we can do is we can replace console.log with logger.info for all of these information ones here, and what we'll do is we'll just we'll start our service up and we'll see how this has actually impacted our logging so far. So we'll just run node against the index.js file, and what you can see here, there's two differences, right? So we've got our old style logging here, and now we've got our new style logging, which is going to have timestamp that this happened, the level that it happened at, and then obviously the message that it's associated with. So what we'll do now is we'll just head into the HTTP server piece here, and we'll add in this logger into here as well. So we'll just do const logger equals require logger, and then we'll just replace this console.log with logger.info. And what that should do, if we restart our application, that one comes back as an info level log there as well. And then finally, what we'll do is we'll just head over to our config here, and we'll import the logger in here as well. Require logger, and what we can do from here is we can actually change these for logger.error, and to give you a bit of an idea as to what these will actually look like, I'll just delete one of these environment variables here, and we should get a couple of error messages come up. So as you can see, these error messages are really easy to then pick up and go, okay, yeah, there's something going on here. So I'll just add that one back in, restart our application, and we should be good. Now while we're here, what I'm going to do as well is just add a quick unit test for our logging solution here, and the only thing that we're actually really going to be needing to worry about too much is this log formatter. So we'll just write a quick unit test for this log formatter here, just to get us to the point where we've got the all of the code coverage that we need for this. So if I could spell test right, all we're going to need to do is we'll just log formatter. We'll just import the log formatter from there. We will add our before each hook into there that we know that we'll need to add, so that we can clear all the mocks down before any tests get run. And then what I'll do is I'll just copy this. I tend to like to copy these and then just rework the test bit inside. So I've got the boilerplate here. So we'll just call that logger, and then we'll just call this log formatter. And then what we want to do is we will just add a simple test that's just going to look at when we pass it in a set of parameters that it spits them back out in the right format for us. So let's just define. Let's write a test first. Test. Given a set of parameters, returns a formatted string. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll just create a set of params, and then we will have timestamp, which we'll have as we'll just new date dot to ISO string. So I'll take a timestamp in there, level, info, message. And now what we need to do is we'll just say the const res equals log formatter params, and then all we need to do then is just say expect res dot to equal, and now what we can do is we can just say what we're expecting it to actually equal. So that's going to be timestamp and then we'll have params.message, and this one should be params.timestamp, and then this one will be params.level, but we'll need to make sure that gets interpolated. So what we're saying here is we're just going to say, given this set of parameters, this is what we're expecting to happen. So we're just asserting that this log formatter will always work. And what you'll often think is, well, that's really obvious that that's going to work because that's pretty much the code that we just wrote to actually do this, right? But what these tests are useful for is regression. So if somebody comes in the future and inadvertently turns around and deletes this params.timestamp, it will then throw an error saying, when they come to run the unit test, it'll throw an error saying it's not what it was expecting, and it'll provide a level of safety for you in the future, because obviously if you start to remove things like timestamps, any systems that are based on the logging that you're running will probably break. So it gives you that extra security that in the future, if somebody comes along and changes something, that you're going to be notified within your tests that that has happened, and it will probably avoid any headaches in the future. So what we're going to do is we'll just npm run unit test, and we'll just check and make sure that our unit tests are passing. And what we're getting at the moment is that our environment provided env is erroring. So let me have a look. I'm going to take a guess that because we've now introduced this new logger here, what we're going to want to do is we'll actually just want to make sure that we mock that out as well. So we'll do jest.mock, and it's going to be logger. And what I've also noticed that we're missing from here as well is we'll want to clear up all the mocks afterwards. So we'll just pop that in there, rerun our tests, and we're all passing. And what you'll see now is that a lot of these error logs that were coming out in our tests as well start to look a lot nicer, and they start to be formatted a lot better and take up a lot less space, so that we're getting a much better view of our tests at the end here. So that's all we've got for this video. I hope you found it useful. I'd certainly recommend going and checking out the Winston GitHub repos. It'll give you a bunch of documentation on the more complex things that you can do with Winston if you want to do some fancy things within logging. But for now, I'll see you in the next video.